you're making decisions, but psychology suggests something deeper is happening. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're stepping into the shadows of human behavior. We're mapping out the architecture of unseen influence. We live in a world where power doesn't just rely on physical strength anymore. It's all about psychological mastery. Powerful minds are using these subtle, hidden tactics to shape your thoughts, your emotions, and your behaviors. And what's truly fascinating is how perfectly these tactics are woven right into our everyday interactions. So, are your decisions truly your own? Take a second to really think about that. We all want to believe our choices are entirely independent, right? But the research we're analyzing today reveals that invisible forces are constantly shaping your reality, your perception of the world. Well, it's being quietly guided by psychological undercurrents that most of us never even realize are there. Let's dive right into the mechanics of how this actually works. The first foundation is cognitive bias exploitation. Basically, human thinking is completely riddled with cognitive biases. They're just natural mental shortcuts we use to make quick decisions. But here's the catch. These shortcuts can be predictably manipulated. When powerful influencers spot these patterns, they literally weaponize them. They bypass your critical thinking entirely and directly steer your decision, completely without your conscious awareness. Think about the shift from independent reasoning to weaponized confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is just our natural tendency to favor information that confirms what we already believe. Think about when you're consuming your daily news or just scrolling through your social media feed. The algorithms and the architects behind them expertly feed your existing beliefs right back to you. They use selective framing to reinforce a narrative that serves their specific agenda. So your independent reasoning is quietly replaced by a manufactured echo chamber, one that pretty much ensures your compliance. And most people never notice this happening. It's actually a chilling reality of human psychology. These forces are operating just beneath the surface of our daily lives, turning our very own mental reflexes against us. Now, let's move on to another incredibly powerful tool of influence, the anchoring effect. This happens when you rely way too heavily on the very first piece of information you encounter. This initial piece of information, the anchor, sets a mental benchmark in your brain. And once that anchor is dropped, it completely traps your subsequent logic, subtly steering your perception of value. Think of an everyday buying decision or maybe a high-stakes negotiation. If someone mentions an initial, outrageously high price, well, that number sets the tone. Even if the final price you get is lower, that original anchor has seamlessly nudged your perception of what is fair. The objective reality of what that item is actually worth is completely lost, replaced entirely by the anchored illusion. And most people never notice this happening. Our natural human predisposition to search for a baseline is literally turned into an invisible weapon. You walk away feeling like you made a totally rational choice, completely unaware that your starting point was actually chosen for you. This brings us to a deeper layer of influence, the subconscious shift into emotional control and dependency. We're now entering the space where influence evolves into outright emotional control, starting with emotional hijacking. You see, logic is actually incredibly fragile. The most powerful minds out there understand that emotions will almost always override rational thought. By pushing the exact right emotional buttons, an influencer creates a psychological shortcut directly to your compliance. They aren't trying to win an argument with facts. No, they're trying to hijack your emotional state entirely. And the process is remarkably systematic. Step 1, trigger the emotion. This could be fear, anger, urgency, or even a deep sense of attachment. Think of fear-based political propaganda or those hyper-urgent advertisements you see all the time. Step 2, override the logic. Because the emotional response is so overwhelming, the critical thinking part of your brain is temporarily shut down. And finally, step 3, secure the compliance. While you're emotionally compromised, the manipulator extracts the exact decision or action that they wanted all along. Which brings us to one of the absolute most insidious forms of psychological control, gaslighting. Now, I really want to emphasize the word awareness here. Gaslighting is the systematic distortion of facts and the outright denial of reality. Its sole purpose is to erode your confidence. It destroys your awareness of what's real, all to manufacture a total psychological reliance on the influencer. We often associate this dynamic with toxic personal relationships, sure, but it operates just as effectively in corporate environments and even massive social groups. The manipulator systematically replaces the victim's memory and their truth with their own imposed narrative. They twist the information until the target literally no longer trusts their own mind. And this destruction of confidence leads directly into the next tactic, creating dependency. By eroding your trust in yourself, the influencer smoothly positions themselves as your primary source of emotional support, validation, and truth. This is advanced psychological manipulation. It fosters deep loyalty, heavily reduces your autonomy, and completely locks you into a controlled environment. The escalation follows a very precise pattern. First, they isolate you from outside feedback. They weaken your connections to friends, family, or any independent sources of information. Second, they become the sole source of truth, completely filling the void they just created. And third, they eliminate your autonomy. This incremental psychological pressure basically builds an invisible cage right around your daily decision-making process.
And most people never notice this happening. The cage is built so slowly, and the psychological levers are pulled so gently that the loss of freedom just feels like a natural progression of events.
But it's not all hopeless. That brings us to our final point: awareness, your final defense. We are not entirely defenseless here. True mastery of these laws isn't just about understanding how they're used against you, it's about recognizing them to protect your own autonomy. You have to recognize the anchor. When a number or idea is presented to you first, question exactly why it was chosen. Step back from emotional triggers. If you feel a sudden spike of fear or urgency, just pause. Your logic is probably being overridden in that moment. Trust your own reality, and above all else, guard your autonomy. So the real question is not whether influence exists, but how often it shapes your life completely without your awareness. These unseen architectures are all around us, operating in the shadows of our daily interactions. By understanding them, you're taking the very first step out of the dark. Start paying attention to the subtle nudges, the emotional spikes, and the frames placed around your reality. If you look closely enough, you might be surprised to find who is actually pulling the strings.